Faith fans get a ton of new incantations in the DLC, and today we'll go through the very best of them, how you can use them best, where you can actually find them, and some more information that you'll definitely want to know. So let's go! Let me know your favorite of these incantations in the comments down below. We'll start with a nice, simple, easy one called Golden Arcs. Now this releases a procession of golden arcs with a swing of the arm. Essentially what that means is you just swing your arm and you shoot golden arcs out in this like nice big circle. Surprisingly, these arcs actually do a solid amount of stagger, and you'll definitely break the poise of enemies if you hit them enough with this like just single spell, which I was actually quite surprised at. The downside to this is that enemies will often move out of the way of these arcs. Now the arcs do move a little bit faster than the alternative, which we're going to get into next, but because it's a smaller arc itself, like enemies that move around a lot will definitely get out of the way. So the benefit here is it's pretty cheap, and you can use these 3 arcs to go out and deal a solid amount of damage without costing too much FP. Now if you want to get the golden arcs, it actually comes from the Morth Ruins, like down in the hole at the Morth Ruins. You'll need to jump down there. There's some Inquisitors down there that after defeating them inside a chest is where you'll find the golden arcs. And why I mentioned that there is an alternative is actually the giant golden arc, which is the same thing except it's 1 arc, and you might have guessed it, it's giant. It's significantly larger than the normal golden arcs. The benefit to this one is it hits its damage significantly more consistently because of how much larger the actual projectile itself is, and the damage numbers are better on it as well. Like it does have a higher FP cost, that projectile does move a little bit slower, but ultimately here you're going to get a better damage output from using this compared to the typical golden arcs, and you can charge this up same as you can with the normal golden arcs for like extra damage. So anything that's obviously buffing, like Godfrey's Icon to improve your damage with charged hits, all that good stuff is great for using this, and it's probably a more consistent AoE like solid damage incantation that you can use, and getting more of these options in the incantations line is really valuable, as in the base game there's tons of these like spammable spells that are all through the spell line, but not many of these in the incantation group, so it's good to have one here. Now this is obtained at the ruins of Unte, which is just after the castle watering hole, which I've covered in plenty of videos how to get to via the secret entrance of the Shadow Keep. If you need to know how to get there, just put a comment in the comments down below and I'll link you to the right video. But once you are there, you'll see a furnace golem that's blocking the path to this area. Essentially what you'll need to do is head to the left and climb up the buildings here and use a hefty furnace pot to activate the furnace golem, and then inside the church, inside that area, is where you'll find the giant golden arc. Fire Serpent is next. Now this incantation is one of Messmers' fire incantations, so the benefit there is that you get a buff from the Fire Knight's seal, Messmers' helm, all that new stuff like the Fire Knight armor as well will all buff the overall damage of this. It's obviously a fire incantation, so anything that buffs fire is good, right? Fire, Scorpion Charm, etc, etc. Now what's good about this is it has a very quick cast time, and it's a similar effect to say like a glint blade, like Magic Glint Blade or Glint Blade Trio, those sort of spells in the other line where you cast it and it sort of lingers for a little bit and then shoots off to the target. Now because it does that, it's very good at actually hitting targets that like to move around a lot, especially targets that like input read and like dodge, when that happens. Like say, we're talking about Malenia earlier with the golden arcs, this is much better at hitting an enemy like that. Plus the damage here is obviously better for enemies that, are resistant to holy like Malenia. But for a really solid and cheap new fire spell with consistent damage plus all the synergies with all that new equipment, it's like really good to actually use if you are running some sort of build like this. This does come from the Shadow Keep in the back section of the Shadow Keep, which in order to get to, you have to go through the church district. Now once you're in the back section here, there is a massive long ladder that you'll need to climb all the way up to, and there's a few fire knights and stuff in this area, so just be careful. But as you explore sort of through these bookshelves and like this area, you'll actually just come across it next to a ledge that you can pick up the Fire Serpent incantation. Heal from Afar is a new healing spell that is significantly better than all of our old healing spells because, as the name might suggest, it works from a distance. So what you can do with this is, say if your Mimic Tier is fighting a tough boss or anything like that, or you don't have to use a Mimic Tier, you can use any other summon, or in co-op, right? If you have friends, unlike me, Mimic Tier is my only friend, you can then actually use this from a distance to get heals off to them and shoot it like towards them. The effect will then go off. Now, if you're not targeting enemies, it'll just go in a direct line in front of you. If you target an enemy, it'll go directly to that enemy, right? So say if you've got a Mimic Tier using that example again, that's like right close to the enemy, you can target the enemy and then shoot it at the enemy, and then it will hit them. You can obviously use this on yourself as well. Funnily enough, you can actually shoot this out and then chase after it and still get the healing effect on yourself if you do want the heal. The heal damage here is like, well, heal damage. The heal benefit here is really, really high. Like, I was surprised at how much this does actually heal, considering you can use it from the safety of being at a distance. So plenty of value here. Plus, it's super cheap in terms of faith cost, but the downside here is it's very expensive in terms of FP, costing 45 at the moment in order to actually cast this. To get heal from Afar, if you start from the Morth Ruins and head north, there is a like cave through the waterway here that if you defeat the enemies inside this cave next to the tree, you'll find heal from Afar. Knight's Light Spear is next. Now, this is one of the strongest new incantation additions. I wanted to talk about it here just because I've ordered these sort of on a slightly spoilery ones towards the end, so I wanted to talk about this one here because it's like the least spoilery of these like really powerful new ones. Now, what this does is it's basically lightning spear, except it's like 6 lightning spears in one. Especially when you charge it up, you get those extra ones that go off as well. Now, the benefit to this is you can buff it with the new Death Knight set that's come out. Any of your lightning, scorpion charm buffs as well are also great here. So plenty of benefits to using this, and the overall damage is fantastic. Even if you get like knocked out of the animation, if those like second like lightning blades have like spawned, they will still go off, so you've got that benefit as well. So not heaps to say, like it's just like a really solid lightning incantation that shoots a ton of projectiles. Its FP cost is relatively low, its faith cost is relatively low, and overall you can buff it in various ways, so plenty of value there. Plus, it not being a holy incantation while still having solid damage helps with all these bosses that have that holy resistance. Just tons of good value here. This comes from the Scorpion River Catacombs, which is filled with Death Blight. Now, in the massive room with the Death Blight and the like spike droppers that drop down, you can climb on top of the spike droppers or take the pathway that is across the bridge behind where the Death Blight eyes are. If you follow that path all the way through, you'll actually come across a room with the incantation that's actually directly behind you there. Multi-layered Ring of Light is next. Now, this is a like multi-layered ring of light, I guess. Like, if you think about the other discus spells in the game, this is very similar to that, except what it will do is that like discus will linger for a period of time and inflict consistent damage while it is actually lingering in that effect. Now, what's good about this is that the damage that it does is quite solid on its own, but when you charge it up, it's even better. Plus, the effect lingers for even longer. If you have enemies that don't move around a lot, the amount of damage that this does is extremely consistent, and you can sort of use this, like charge this up and send it out, and then maybe switch to another spell and like spam that out to them while this effect is still going off. It does do a decent amount of stagger like while it is out, but the benefits here obviously because of the effect lingers and does deal a solid amount of holy damage. You can also buff it with the new Dry Leaf Seal that has come out as well, so you can buff it with that on top of it because it is one of Miquella's new incantations. Now, this comes from defeating a misbegotten crusader in the Stone Coffin Fissure. Now, in order to get here, you will have to have at least been to the Shadow Keep. You don't have to beat anything there, you just have to have been there to unlock this like access to this area. Now, the Stone Coffin Fissure is actually located to the very south of the Cerulean coast. If you follow the path all the way down through the Cerulean coast, like onto that cliff face, and there'll actually be a fissure that you can like drop down into that'll give you access to the Stone Coffin Fissure. You will definitely run into this misbegotten just like as you're traveling through this area. It's like very hard to miss, so don't worry too much about that, but you just got to actually get to that area and have actually unlocked it first. For the next one, I wanted to compare one of the new Remembrance drops, and this is Bayle's Tyranny and Bayle's Flame Lightning. Now, both of these, you can only get one of them from the Grand Altar of Dragon Communion after you have beaten Bayle, and you can put the heart into this Dragon Communion. We'll start with Bayle's Tyranny. Now, what this does is it channels the Dread Dragon to like roar with this Heat Blade Blast. What's cool about this is that it only requires Arcane, which is kind of fun. Like, there's no faith requirements here at all, so you can get away with having like virtually no faith if you wanted to use this in just like a strict Arcane build. Now, you can also buff this with the new Magma Talisman. The damage here is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's great. It's a solid AoE, but the range on it isn't great. Like, it's one of those incantations that you have to be like super close to the target in order to like get this effect off. But then by that time, you know, they're going to knock you out of the animation. They're just going to hit you anyway. So why not use something else? Like, I wouldn't be using this in any particular build unless I was trying to roleplay as like the dragon. Like, it doesn't seem as consistent in terms of its actual damage output, and just the speed of actually getting this off takes forever. So it's just not really good in that regard. Now, Bayle's Flame Lightning is actually a little bit better. The difference here is that you will use sort of like a Dragon Claw animation, except you do like a Flame Lightning infused attack like Bayle does in the fight. Now, this is much easier to aim, and because it is like a bit of more of a gap closer, you can do this from a little bit distance, get that initial wind up happening, and then it'll jump you forward so you can get the damage happening there. I did have a little bit of weirdness happening with the actual like damage output with this one. Like, might just need a little bit of like bug fixing. Like, sometimes it just seems like it hits the enemy but does like virtually no damage, and then sometimes it hits them and like wrecks their health, which is really weird. So not sure if that's like a bug or an intentional thing, but as you only get one of Bayle's hearts, this is definitely the option I would go for. It's the same as the other one, that it only requires arcane in order to wield, but it would definitely be the one that I would pick up with that one heart that you get in order to pick one of these. Next is Messmers Orb. Now, this is really good. It has a really high faith requirement at 60, and it also a very high FP cost. But what you can do with this is essentially use it to jump yourself in the air and then slam back down and do a massive fire explosion of Messmer's Flame. Now, the benefits to this are obviously exactly the same as the Fire Serpent we touched on earlier. So you can buff this with Fire Knight Seal, Messmer's Helm, also the Fire Knight Armor as well, and any other fire buffs that you want to use. Now, this is a solid amount of fire damage when it does go off, and it does knock enemies back in the explosion, which is some great stagger as well for smaller enemies. The downside here is definitely that high FP cost. Also, if you do get knocked out of it, right, like that doesn't help. But because it does jump you in the air, for any like lower ground attacks, like you can sort of use this to dodge that animation and then land back down and deal damage, which is really nice when you do actually get that actual effect happening. But the damage here is really solid, and it's definitely something you could use in one of those sort of Messmer or fire themed build for sure. Plus, you can charge this up to increase its potency, so you've got that additional benefit as well. Now, you get this from trading in the Remembrance of the Impaler to Enya at the Round Table Hold. You can get this instead of grabbing the Spear of Impaler, but it's definitely a good fire incantation to use. Pest Threads Spears is potentially the best new incantation, depending on your preferences, compared to this or Knight's Lightning Spear. Now, this is basically the original Pest Threads, except they're much bigger and deal a significant amount of more damage. You can charge this up to increase its potency. It is a fantastic incantation to track targets. Like, you say, you know, are using it on Millennia or something like that, move around a whole lot. This is really good for that as well. The downside to this is you can't really buff it with any of the new kit or any of the old seals, etc. Same as the original Pest Threads, but this is definitely stronger than the original Pest Threads, which was already pretty good. This one's like even better in that regard. Now, just before the Church of the Bud side of Grace is actually where you'll find this, like behind that massive staircase that leads you up to that area. So as you're exploring through there, which you have to come through here as part of the main story, you will actually be able to find it here. Now, it's one of the later incantations you can get. You can get here very early in the DLC, but you probably won't be going here until you actually have to. So that's why it's at the end of this list, and it's also probably one of the best. So that is also why it's there as well. But let me know your thoughts on this list in the comments down below. What's your favorite new incantation? Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.